Where is the upset? Because you know it's coming. College Game Day is in Boulder for an historic occasion. Plenty of picks coming, but there is one major theme in college football that trumps everything else. This is the College Game Day Podcast for Friday, September 15th. Rece Davis here, Pete Thamel on assignment, doing a Caleb Williams story. We will get Pete's picks. There will be no malfeasance. If he submits them 1 second after the kickoff of the first game on Saturday, they are null and void, and he's 0 for the week, period. He was 4-6 last week, as I was. The great Stanford Steve, 6-4, leading the way in the race for the Ribeye, and he's 2 games over 500 for the season. Stanford Steve is here with us. And Steve, before we get into picks, I mentioned that there's a theme that's more important than any of the games. It's more important than the story of Deion Sanders leading the resurgence at Colorado. It's more important than Texas being back. It's more important than what's wrong with Alabama. It's more important than can Tennessee win in the swamp for the first time in 20 years. Here is the pressing issue in all of college football. Should Taylor be allowed to wear Maryland gear to the Maryland-Virginia game when his wife's nephew plays for Virginia?
That's a tough one. Are we going to see him post-game?
Probably not. There's a chance, but I think it's probably like an 85% chance that we do not.
How many pictures are we going to take?
If we're with him, there'll probably be a picture taken pre-game with his parents. Definitely a picture taken in lot 1.
What is the temperature gauge of the parents?
Parents probably uncaring, to a certain extent.
That doesn't sound.
You don't sound.
I'm not sure.
Probably uncaring.
I mean, my brother-in-law, he's a pretty laid back guy. I could see him not be. I'm not sitting with him in the Virginia section either, so that should be noted.
Okay. All right, you're good.
You think so?
Yeah. Just have them bring an extra Virginia shirt in case Virginia pulls off the unthinkable, so you do have a Virginia shirt post-game.
I told him earlier in the week, just go base layer. Wear Terp's drawers or something. So that he feels good about it, but he's not I don't understand the upside of aggravating your wife and her family. Do you know that there'll be consequences beyond the game for that, Taylor?
Yeah. My wife, we got a pack tonight, so we're going to have a serious discussion about tonight. One thing that's been proposed to me is it is a blackout, so just wearing a black shirt.
There you go.
And then maybe I'll wear a hat, and if we got to take a picture, I throw the hat in my pocket, and that's it.
Perfect.
You're a big gear guy, Steve. Who have you picked out for Saturday?
Well, we're going out west. We're out there, right, Rece? Yeah. I'm not a wilderness guy, so the only thing to keep me comfortable out there, and you keep mentioning them because they burned you, or you didn't trust in them when it came down to it, week 1, and that's the old Laramie boys. So we're gonna have some Wyoming gear to rep out in the Rockies.
I should be ashamed and admonished because they've been so good to me in Super Dogs over the years. So good.
I just think about the points you would have got the W too.
I know. Yeah, it was a catastrophic error in judgment and lack of trust and betrayed by the fact that I was very high on Texas Tech and still think that they're probably going to clip somebody. But now with 2 losses already, I know they aren't conference losses, but I have a hard time now seeing them be a factor there with 2 losses. Now the increased pressure of no margin for error. I mean, they've got margin for error in the conference, but I don't know. I think they'll still clip a team or 2 that you wouldn't expect. They'll probably still get better. They're going to put up some points, and they're really going to be tough in Lubbock. But boy, you know what? On that subject, what a win for Oregon. What a win for Oregon at Texas Tech last Saturday night. Sort of lost in the Alabama-Texas attention, deservedly so. but that was a great road win, comeback fight, answer every challenge. Great win for the Ducks.
Yeah, and like I said, when a team goes on the road, Rece, like in an instance like that, I want to give credit to the team that won, just like what happened in Tuscaloosa. But going back and watching it, Texas Tech did it to themselves. There were some clock decisions I didn't agree with, and then going for two early. That just I don't get it. I don't like it. I don't know if there was just all that energy pent up and making a decision and getting overthinking things too much. But yeah, Texas Tech they got to get back on track fast. That's a tough I thought they might be 0-2 as you did, or 2-0 before the season. Now it's worst case scenario 0-2. Not a blemish on the conference record, but those are two huge opportunities there that they let slip away.
Before we make some picks, I'll go ahead and go into my annual rant about 2-point conversions. I know that people have done these spreadsheets and the analytics and all of that stuff, and you can do the things where, okay, I know if I go for two here, I'll know what I have to do later. I think that's ridiculous. 2-point conversions, go for two only when you have to, and only when you can reasonably have a reasonable expectation of the number of possessions left in the game. So the loose rule of thumb is kick the freaking thing until the fourth quarter. Just kick it. Even in the fourth quarter this week, as we go back through the Tennessee-Florida history, Butch Jones' decision a few years ago when they went up 12 in the fourth quarter to go ahead and kick the extra point is, got a lot of criticism at the time because, as the late great Pat Dye used to say, hindsight's 50-50, right? But you act like it's guaranteed that you're going to get the two.
Yeah.
I'm actually okay with going up 13 because, indulge me for a moment as I run through this scenario, right? Okay, you go up by 12. You decide to go for two. You don't get it. Okay, you're sitting on a 12. Let's say the score is 26-14. Other team scores, right? All right. Other team scores 26-21 because that's what they're going to do because the two doesn't help them. Other team scores again as it happens. Now it's 27-26. What are they going to do? They're going to go for two, right?
Mm-hmm.
You still have a chance there, even if you're sitting on a 27, that a field goal can win the game, and at worst, a field goal ties the game, right? So the other one, if you go ahead and you go for the two, well, they tie you or they can win the game right there. So I don't think it's as much of a no-brainer depending on the time left in the game. Now, if they've only got time for two possessions or something like that, then maybe you go ahead and think about it to go ahead and extend your opportunity. It's not the absolute no-brainer that every time you're up 12 in the fourth quarter, you have to go for two. Time and place. Anyway, that's a long way. I'm always like, kick it, kick it, kick it, kick it, kick it.
Yeah.
Pile up the points. I remember, last thing on this, I remember Joe Tiller, great as he was, blew a bowl game against Georgia. I don't remember the year or which year, but they missed one early, missed the kick early. So they spent the rest of the half or so chasing the point. They didn't get it. And then, as it turns out, Georgia came back and, just beat them by a couple. And if you went back in your mind, he said, well, you got to imagine they would have made the extra points after that. Had they just made them, would have won the game. Take the point. Take the point until you have to go for two. That's the impossible to make a long story short at this point, but take the point and move on. Maybe take the hook when you're making picks here. Are you ready to make some picks? Anything that you are particularly wary of, excited about when it comes to making the picks this week? Something you're really looking forward to?
Well, we only have two ranked teams given less than a touchdown. So that really gets me excited. I cannot wait for Saturday morning to see the array of super dogs that will plenty of people could get right back in the mix, as you did last week, right? And I just missed a win, but we got to cover at least. So we got some on the board. Pat only got 1 point for the push he had with Jacksonville State. But this, I get it. It's not sexy. It's not going to draw people to it. But these are the weekends I love because now we're learning more about these teams. I think we're going to see Colorado State already making a quarterback change. What's Alabama do after that last week that we were there for? I think there's a lot of questions still out there, and we still have all these great out of conference games. So I'm totally up for it. I think multiple ranked. I get the big spreads. I think multiple ranked teams lose this week.
Okay, I'm writing that down in the notebook right now because Saturday morning when we do the show, I'm going to I shouldn't give you this heads up. We like for it to be completely spontaneous because I think people know, unlike a lot of television shows, there's no teleprompter out there. We just go, right? I mean, we plan. There's a rundown. Some people call it a format. We call it a rundown. That's a guide about what the discussion topics are, but nobody scripts what they're going to say, right? You think about it. You gather your thoughts. You make notes on your thoughts, but you don't script it. I like to surprise you. But that's you're going to need a number for me on Saturday morning. Number of ranked teams that will go down to unranked opponents. I'm going to get Marissa Dowling, our great researcher, on that too, because that's always something that I enjoy over the course of the early part of the season. The number of ranked opponents that lose to unranked opponents and how that compares historically. Now, Pete's not with us, as mentioned a couple of times in the last couple of podcasts, working on this Caleb Williams story. Can't wait to read it and to see it. Going to be tremendous. But Pete has an obligation to this podcast. The obligation is that he make picks. The obligation is that there is no malfeasance, that he doesn't try to sneak around and say, oh, yeah, I picked Missouri. I had them. So we're going to make sure that Pete's picks are handed to Taylor in some way, shape, form, or fashion, put out for all the world to see before the first kickoff at noon Eastern on Saturday. Taylor, are you up for this?
I will raise it, and they are given by the end of this podcast. That's how Pete. We know how much he's on the authorities on the phone. He can answer a text from Taylor and get his picks in. So
okay,
Taylor, he's got a little homework assignment. That's all.
Well, good news, everyone. I've got him.
No way.
Oh.
Really?
We've got him.
I knew it.
Yeah.
I knew it.
Yeah. Oh. Steve, you know what happened here, everyone?
Put a little pressure.
Steve bullied me into bullying Pete, and honestly, the chain of bullying worked.
Hey, are you guys? I hate to admit this. In a past life, I often watched a soap opera with my wife way back when. I don't really anymore. Although Victor Newman on The Young and the Restless is one of the great soap opera characters of all time. And by the way, the actor who portrays Victor Newman, a man called Eric Braeden, is a very good personal friend of Stephen A. Smith, who also is a huge soap opera watcher. I think Stephen A. has watched every episode of General Hospital for the last 40 years or however long it's been on. So the reason I said that was to say this. Taylor, you're going to make the picks. And here's what they do in soap operas when there is someone sitting in for an actor who is ill or otherwise on assignment. So here we go. Portraying the role of Pete Thamel today will be Taylor Schwenk, Maryland fan. Okay. Now we're ready to go. Are you ready to play? Are you going to do a Pete imitation, or are you just going to give it to us straight?
Well, Rece, I was on the phone earlier with the assistant wide receiver coach at Illinois, and I feel like that's mean.
No, I feel like if every pick you make, you reference the training intern that I spoke to earlier, the assistant wide receiver coach, the graduate assistant in the film study department. If you make every pick like that, that would be podcast gold. So we're going to challenge your creative skills. And with that, let's make some picks. I submit that the order always be Pete last so that Steve and I can then evaluate your description of delivering Pete's picks.
You got it. All right, let's get it started here. We got 10 games to pick. We're going to fly through them. Penn State, a 14.5-point favorite at Illinois. That kicks off at noon. Let's go Rece, then Steve.
Okay, there's no way Illinois wins this game. Let's just get that out there. No chance Illinois wins this game. Penn State's a lot better than they are. But styles make fights. Sleepy start early, 11 a.m. kickoff there. Illinois a little aggravated, and the fact that they've got a good defensive front and Penn State's not necessarily going to run the quarterback. It's not like they're going to chase Jalen Daniels around as they did last week at Kansas. I'm going to go desperation, early start. Penn State, clearly the better team, wins the game, but doesn't cover. I think that half point's going to save me. I'm going to take Illinois and the points at home.
All right, you mentioned it, Rece. The defensive front, but when I look at the numbers, they've given up 955 yards of offense to Toledo and Kansas. And you mentioned the optics.
Different styles of offense for those two teams than Penn State's going to bring in.
No doubt. That's what I say. You mentioned desperation. You mentioned 11 a.m. local kick. They're begging you to take Penn State because of the numbers they've put up, scoring 63 and 38. Aller, this is the game I had circled all offseason. I picked Penn State to make the playoff. I need to see him in this circumstance. I know Illinois is going to bring the fight. They're going to be better defensively. The question I have is Illinois' offense, because they're going to have to score in order to be in this game. Allmeyer's shown flashes, but last week they forgot the game started at 7:30 Eastern and didn't show up until the second half. So they need to be ready to go at 11 a.m. local. I'm with you. Somehow, some way, Burt finds his team to hang. The question is, do they lead in this game? Are they already always trailing and they backdoor it? That's what I think they could take. I believe they have the lead in the first half and they hang around the rest of the game. I'll take the Illini plus the points.
They will not lead past the 12-minute mark of the second quarter. I'm banking on kind of a backdoor.
Okay. All right.
Now we're getting ridiculously specific. All right, go ahead, Taylor.
Well, fellas, I was talking to linebackers coach Andy Buh. I don't normally give up my sources, but he said to me, Drew Aller, do it on the road, okay? And that's what I'm going to challenge Drew Aller to do, and I'm going to go with Illinois right here and not save the graphic.
I'm going to tell you that's pretty good, but I'm also going to tell you that if I were Pete and sometime when I'm out and you guys mock me and imitate me, I'm going to say one and done on the imitation, though it was good. Though I do challenge you to continue to bring up the assistant coaches, which is a good bit. What's next for us?
You also forgot Pete would have definitely mentioned Illinois brought 2 defensive tackles to Big Ten Media Day.
Oh, yeah, that's good. That's very good.
Good one. That's definitely on our Pete bingo card.
The Pete bingo card. That's great.
He's the authority, man. He's the best.
All right, let's go to the next one. We're getting mean over here. Let's go to Kansas State, -5, a 5-point favorite on the road against Missouri. That kicks off at noon.
Yeah, this got ugly last year when Missouri went to Kansas State and sort of gave you a look at what Kansas State was going to be the rest of the season. Something tells me Coach Drink's going to have his guys ready for this. I love what they have on the defensive front. It hasn't been pretty. They skated by a middle team last week that I'm telling you, going back and watching Alabama in middle in week 1, I was kind of impressed with what middle brought to the table. Obviously, they were undersized, but they had a plan offensively. They had a quarterback that was decisive. They're a spunky team to keep your eye on moving forward when it comes to numbers and spreads and looking at that. But I'm taking Missouri here plus the points. I think it's a field goal game. Kansas State doesn't look like the Kansas State of old. Obviously, Deuce Vaughn's gone, but the run game has struggled, and a lot has been put on Howard's plate. I think Missouri's ready to go early on, and I think they stay in this game. I'm going to take the points with the home team.
Bill Connolly mentioned on Wednesday that Kansas State there had been an inordinate number of 3-and-outs, but if they pick up that first down, they've been pretty good on offense, and they have lacked some explosion in the running game, which might stand to reason with Deuce Vaughn being gone, even though the entire offensive front and the quarterback have returns for them. I feel like I'm being suckered into home dogs. So I'm going to go Costanza and go against that little inclination and go with the team that I think is a lot better. Plus the fact that they don't like each other. So I don't know that the early start, and Kansas State plays a lot of those early starts anyway. So I don't think that's going to be that big of a factor for them. Going on the road probably won't bother them, given the fact that they have so many guys who play the Big 12 championship game. Not that that's a road game, but it's certainly a big stage, and the Sugar Bowl. So I'm gonna lay them. The SEC has had trouble with non-conference, and when you're counting on Missouri, Missouri and Mississippi State to save your pride there, I'm not sure what that says, but I'm going to go with Kansas State, the reigning Big 12 champions, and lay the 5 points.
Pete Thamel's source inside the K-State locker room is Chili Davis, the special teams quality control coach, and because of that, he's going to take Kansas State also minus the 5. Next up, LSU, a 9.5-point favorite on the road at Mississippi State. That game also kicks off at noon. Rece, start us off.
Okay, this one is really tempting. Mississippi State at home getting almost double digits again. But I feel as if LSU will be able to cover that number. Will Rogers, sensational, record-setting quarterback, but a little bit of a different system. They've been a lot more balanced in running the ball. I'm not sure they'll be able to do that against LSU. Saw some adjustments, albeit against Grambling, and maybe the way Harold Perkins was used the second game as opposed to the first game. Boy, I hate going against a home dog, no pun intended, with Mississippi State with that many points. But I'm going to take LSU and say that they're able to win it by 10.
Yeah, this is a tough one. When you look at what happens with LSU, great to see Mason Smith back in that lineup on defense for them. How does that defense look going on the road? That's what I need to see. We saw the corners get lit up. I didn't like what I saw from the defensive line from Florida State, but this isn't Florida State. What I will say here is I believe Garrett Nussmeier comes to the rescue for LSU. Whoa. I believe we see him. I believe we see him in this game. I don't think it's enough. I'm going to take the home dog here, but I think we're going to see Mr. Nussmeier here under center in the second half for LSU.
Wow. Why?
I think Daniels is going to struggle. And I just – this is one of those circumstances, Rece, where Brian is going to – he has a short fuse. Those cowbells will be ringing in the first half, and I believe we're going to see Nussmeier in the second half. Think about all those things that Notre Dame back in the day, all the things that he created with the quarterback. This is a circumstance where I see them struggling early, where they need consistency throwing the football. I believe Nussmeier gets under center.
Whoa. What does Pete have to say?
Pete getting his intel from the assistant director of operations, Harris Bivin. He went LSU for this one.
This is tremendous, Taylor. This is you're doing excellent work here. What do you got next?
Minnesota on the road at North Carolina. North Carolina, a 7.5-point favorite. This kicks off at 3:30 p.m.
This is tough because this is total contrast. The styles. You think about the glitz and the glamour, the Carolina boys, and then you think about Minnesota just want to come down and muck it up. Carolina, back to same old last week defensively against App State. As nice and as good as they looked against South Carolina, they were back to their not winning ways, defensive winning ways against App State. 7.5, tricky number. But I have to take the quarterback in this situation. I went against them in week 1. I do believe that Chizik will have his guys ready for not as exotic or tough to defend offense in Minnesota. Minnesota knows what they want to do. I believe that'll help Carolina. I'm gonna hate the number, but I'm gonna lay it with Drake May.
I'm going to do the same thing for the same reason. The Appalachian State game last week from North Carolina was certainly worrisome. You look at Minnesota, and they did everything but lose the game against a Nebraska team, which is apparently cursed and ungood. So there is this big part of you that can see PJ Fleck kind of, grinding this game out, shortening it, controlling the clock. They've got a great safety in Tyler Nubin, who has a nose for the football, and Drake's turned it over, a couple times against South Carolina. One was a deflection, but, you could see all of these scenarios where they keep it close. And then I say, do I really think they're going to keep North Carolina from scoring 24 points? The answer is no. And I don't see Minnesota, really getting into a back and forth with them. So I'm going to hesitantly lay it with Carolina and the big quarterback advantage too. What says Pete?
We're going to continue flipping through Pete's little black book here. Tanner Snusted, a recruiting assistant for Minnesota, giving Pete good intel. He's taking the Gophers to win.
Wow.
Straight up.
So,
okay.
See, Steve, I will say this. You and I are tempted, yet not able to have the guts to pull the trigger. Pete, on the other hand, says flat out Minnesota goes into Chapel Hill, wins. What a feather in the cap of B1G if Minnesota beats North Carolina after the way the ACC has performed in the early going here. What's up next, Taylor?
We have an enormous line here. South Carolina at Georgia. Georgia, a 27.5-point favorite. Rece, on Wednesday's podcast, you pondered if that was a little too large.
Yeah, this is one of those matchups, too. It's got some feelings involved. Rece, there's some feelings. You saw the antics last year of when Georgia went to South Carolina in crazy conditions. I don't know. I still don't know how Kirby's staff built that air conditioning unit that they ran to at the half to get under. But our first time, it feels like, game day. I mentioned that, on my note to the staff, we got to get the two top ranked teams. Now we know it. The scheduling gods, came back, and Georgia was supposed to play Oklahoma this year. Michigan was supposed to play UCLA. We didn't get that because of conference realignment. But I think it's a coming out party for Georgia. I looked at what South Carolina had on the offensive line, and then they lost a couple guys in the first half defensively against North Carolina. This is a coming out party for Georgia. I think they're going to put it on South Carolina. I think it's a long day for Rattler. I think we're really going to see the depth of Georgia and the versatility they have. I'm going to lay it in 27.5 with Georgia.
Make no mistake, this is going to be a blowout. 41-17 is a cover. 41-14 is a cover. 49-24 is a cover. I'm going to take the huge number. I think South Carolina is going to get whacked.
Okay.
But I'll take the big number. I think they'll pop enough plays to put a couple touchdowns on the board at least. And so I'll take the 27 and a hook.
So I was looking at Pete's notes. He was telling me that Dell McGee, the running game coordinator, he actually built that HVAC unit with his bare hands. So because of that, he's going to go Georgia minus the 27.5. Next up, Washington, a 16-point favorite, headed to East Lansing, playing the Spartans there. That's 5 o'clock kickoff. Let's go Rece, then Steve.
I talked extensively about the problems for Michigan State on Wednesday's podcast. And, it's hard to know exactly whether that will be galvanizing or distracting. The other thing that's a little bit easier to know is whether it will matter. Michigan State, coming off a good week from Noah Kim, getting 16 at home, feels like one of those things that's right in the historically vintage Sparty wheelhouse. Get some big shot in there, and you're laying points, you knock them off. Bill Connolly pointed out that Michigan State has done a really good job putting pressure on the passer, and they've been able to do so without blitzing. In the offseason, there was a lack of experience on Washington's offensive line, though someone close to the program has told me how much they like their tackles, and so far that has proven to be true. I'm going to go with Penix, those receivers, Washington's ability to stop Michigan State, which I think they will be able to do. The turmoil in East Lansing right now, combined with the fact that Washington, in my judgment, is a vastly superior team, I'm going to take the Huskies and lay the 16.
Yeah, this is another instance. We mentioned Drew Aller, Rece, earlier, going on the road for the first time with this group of Penn State Nittany Lions. This is another instance. I want to see Penix on the road with this team. I thought Michigan State battled last year early on and hung around longer than I thought they would. But the outlier in this, we saw how great of a play caller Steve Sarkisian was, right? The week before that, we saw Mike Norvell, and I just call them assassins. They are not afraid, and I put Kalen DeBoer in that category of just not taking your foot off the gas. When there's those third downs and, you're looking to move the chains, whether it's being conservative, those guys don't do it. They're still going with their matchup because they want to keep the foot on the gas. That's what I want to see here with DeBoer against Michigan State. You mentioned all the stuff with Michigan State. Brutal spot. Really a good chance for that great home crowd and that great fan base they have to rally around their guys. And when I look at Michigan State, they've exceeded my expectations on offense. I get it. It's Central Michigan, but you put up 31 there in a tight game. And then Richmond's usually a really good FCS team, and they buried them 45-14. So I'm very wary of this, but I'm going to go with DeBoer with you. I just feel like the foot will be on the gas. Odunze's already got 14 catches for 230 plus in 2 games. They're lethal, and this is their test. I know. I think you were on them. The only concern you had about Washington was the offensive line. We'll see how good that offensive line is on the road here in East Lansing, but I don't like laying double digits on the road, but I'm going to do it here because of the combination with Penix and DeBoer.
Yesterday, Pete called me to tell me he was blowing off the podcast. And then in mid-conversation, he did the bit where he took a phone call, but didn't hang up on me, like put me on hold, said, I'll be right back. I'm pretty sure he was talking to passing game coordinator at Washington, Jamarcus Shepard. And then, didn't call me back for literally an hour. I eventually hung up and just said, just call me, man. It's okay. You didn't have to put me on hold, but he's taking Washington in this one.
You've got a future, Taylor. You've got a future, kid. That's really good.
You do have to put like a precursor, like all these names are whatever, not official, or because people are going to assume that like these really are Pete's sources. So yes. We do have to have a precursor. Yes,
yeah. I mean, I hope it's obvious to everybody.
Pete's gonna be getting tweets like, "What the hell are these people talking about?"
Yeah, this is like let me say, I'll offer the disclaimer right here. We mentioned right at the top that portraying the role of Pete Thamel is Taylor Schwink, and he's putting his own spin on Pete Thamel as a character. This is in no way intended to divulge any real sources. Any similarities between any real person, live or dead, depicted in this podcast are purely coincidental and not meant to be taken completely seriously. We do not have these sources from Pete, yet this has been kind of fun. And in many ways, you might think we're teasing Pete and picking on Pete, and you'd be right, we are. However, it's also paying homage to Pete, because as I've gotten to know him over the last couple of years, and I'm not just saying this because we're teasing him, but what a great guy. But the one question I've had for him, how do you maintain this number of relationships? It is mind-boggling, the number of relationships that he is able to maintain, the trust he has earned, deservedly so. It's a fascinating study in excellence at your craft. That said, let's go back to having some fun at Pete's expense. That's fun. So, because I know you knuckleheads would do the same thing to me for sure.
Well, Steve knows the number one rule of like radio and podcasting is if you're not present, you're a target. So we're just playing by the rules here. No big deal.
That's right.
Next up, Tennessee -6.5 at Florida. That kicks off at 7 p.m. Let's go Rece then, Steve.
Sometimes you have to do something for zero reason, right? I mean, sooner or later, Tennessee's going to win in the Swamp. They haven't won since 2003. Gotten off to a little bit of a slow start, and Florida looked abysmal. Not because Utah wasn't better than them. They are. They're a lot better than Florida. But Florida looked sloppy, disorganized, and still for some reason, home in the Swamp rivalry game, almost feel like if you're going to stand up and do anything this season, this is going to be it. after that start on the big stage. If you're going to stand in there, you might as well stand in against your rival. And I'm going to take Florida in the points. I don't know if they'll win the game, but I'll go with the home dog here. And this has a chance to be in the running for the worst pick I could possibly make. I've got zero confidence in Florida. I've got zero reason to take the Gators in the points, even in a close loss. And yet, for some reason, maybe it's just 20 years of visits to the swamp from the Big Orange, and really more than that, but 20 since they've won. Maybe it's just that, but I'm going to take Florida in the points and just, spin that wheel of fortune, as it were.
I'm going to agree. I love the situation for Florida. I get it. It's been ugly. But when I go back and look at Florida, Rece, this is a team. Vegas at the beginning of the year had a win total of 5.5. And I wasn't expecting much at all. I actually thought it was going to be worse against Utah. And they moved the football. The mental mistakes of 4th and 1 3 times really, really cost themselves. And with that home crowd going to the swamp, the combination of Tennessee not looking right offensively. Joe Milton got more hype than anybody coming into the season. To my expectation level, he hasn't backed it up. Is he going to go into the swamp against an absolutely motivated and desperate team and win by more than a touchdown? I'm going to say no. I'm going to take Florida plus the points. I think they have an excellent chance to win the game. They like I said, the offense exceeded my expectation. That's what worried me more about that. I'm not worried about Florida's defense. They have talent. That home crowd will be involved. They'll make things uncomfortable. I think Mertz has to obviously play well and complete passes to keep Milton off the field, and I believe they do that. I think Napier has a good plan, and I believe in the Gators at home plus the points.
Pete is going to save a graphic for us. He's going to take Tennessee, and his source on the Tennessee coaching staff is Rhett Brooks, the assistant director of football sports performance. I think he likes Rhett because Pete wishes he was a Southern guy, so he likes a good Southern name, so he's going to gravitate towards a guy like Rhett. All right, next up, BYU at Arkansas. Arkansas an 8-point favorite at home. That kicks off at 7:30 p.m. Let's go, Steve, then Rece.
Not your typical BYU team. We saw Arkansas go there last year and give it to them. I think it's a big spot for KJ. I do worry about the receivers as conference play starts for Arkansas. They have not shown the ability to separate and make windows tougher for KJ. But like I said, this is a big spot for Dan Enos. At home, you get, it's a return matchup after a weird road trip in the middle of the season last year to go to Provo. Now Provo has to come to Fayetteville. I'll take Arkansas minus the points.
I'm gonna do the same. KJ Jefferson put it on him last year. Big night, 5 touchdown passes, threw for 367. How about this? A Big 12 SEC game, another opportunity for a team to knock off a team from the SEC. BYU scuffled around on offense a little bit early on, so I'm gonna say home crowd, better team. I'll say Arkansas is able to get out of there with a win bigger than 8.
Pete's taking those points on the road with BYU. He got a phone call from Alfred Papunu when he was having dinner with Ryan McGee, as he described on Monday's podcast, and simply walked out of the restaurant mid-dinner to take a call from Alfred. So that's how you know he's a reliable source here. Next up, we'll do Pitt, a 1-point favorite on the road at West Virginia. The Backyard Brawl, 7:30 p.m. I love the Backyard Brawl. Let's go, Rece, then Steve.
I love the Backyard Brawl also. We were there on Thursday night last year when they renewed that series. They should play all the time, should do whatever it takes to play. Mm-hmm. This is really a big spot for Neil Brown after the loss to Penn State, which certainly was expected. No one necessarily expected them to win. But he needs something positive to go in his favor. I'm going to take the home crowd getting a point and say that West Virginia finds a way to pull it out against a Pittsburgh team that, coming off the loss last week, both teams sitting there 1-1. I guess I'll go home crowd and take West Virginia to pull this one out. Because actually they played a little better against Penn State than I thought that they would.
Totally agree. That's what I'm going off of here. This is the real backyard brawl when it's at West Virginia. The passion, what they bring, their loyalty to their team is something that I appreciate. But, man, West Virginia is a team that every time I lean in and take, they never back me up. But I'm still going to stick with them here. Give me the Mountaineers. I expect a crazy environment. It's not going to be pretty. Both these teams, I think they're a struggle on the offensive side. But I like West Virginia's ability at home, juiced up crowd, night game, the way it should be for a backyard brawl. I just hope they wear their traditional uniforms. That would be a nice help for West Virginia. I'm not asking for the old Major Harris face mask or anything, but just, the traditional mustard pants, gold pants, whatever they call their gold. I can't keep track with all these schools with the different yellows, but give me the Mountaineers at home.
I believe it's old gold for the Mountaineers, and
what's Pitt's mustard?
Just something gross.
As long as Pitt got rid of the gold was awful.
Remember Bill Stewart always used to talk about the blue and the old gold.
That's right.
Oh man, how are you going to invoke Bill Stewart? Woo! Gotta listen. If you're a West Virginia fan, you should listen to that pregame speech before you head to the game. That's an all timer right there. Pete Thamel, he covers all his bases. He was talking to Dr. Sofia Espana Perez, the clinical and sports behavioral health therapist. She gets in the mind of these guys. She was really feeding Pete some good info. He's going Mountaineers plus the point there at home.
Okay.
Steve's
over the bit here.
Your skills of finding obscure staff members on the internet on the fly is unparalleled.
Very, very impressive.
That's all I got here. Last game for the day, TCU, a 7.5 point favorite at Houston. That kicks off at 8 p.m. Eastern. Steve, start us off.
Last week on the show, Rece, I gave out a last stand pick, and I promised I wouldn't mention them if they didn't win, and that was Northwestern. They got the job done against UTEP. I shouldn't because of what I saw against Colorado and just a wet paper napkin defense. I believe both teams have wet paper towel defenses in this game. I'm going to lay them with TCU. I don't like it. I don't love it. But Houston's a team that is just so last week was so predictable after getting that win against UTSA and then coming back and losing to Rece. I think TCU learned a lot about themselves. I do trust that coaching staff. With Sonny in charge, and I think they were humbled in a big way against Colorado. I expect them to come out big time here. That offense still scored points, and that's where I'm going to go. The offense is a difference in this game that won't have a lot of defense. I'll take the 7.5. I'll lay the 7.5 with the purple.
First Big 12 game for Houston.
Yeah.
Too, after moving into the Power 5 conference. Had the weird game in which they kicked the Bayou bucket after – looked as if they were going to get blown out. Then they come back, and then they get it to overtime. Then they lose against Rece. Sort of the quintessential Houston game, it seems, if you looked at the number of times they squandered leads last year or rallied, and then, it didn't go their way at the end. I understand what you're saying. I don't know which way to go on this. I want to take the points with Houston at home, and I know Rece is much improved. I think your guy Mike Bloomgren is a good coach in a difficult circumstance, and I think they're very much improved. So I don't want to, get too hard on them because they lost to Rece like maybe you would in years past. But man, I just can't. I'm gonna reluctantly lay the points with TCU. I just can't. I can't do it with Houston right now, even though there's a lot in me that wants to, with what I'm sure will be a revved up crowd, landmark moment for the program's return, to a power conference. I want to, and I do not trust TCU at all right now. But maybe they can earn it back. So I'm going to lay the 7.5 reluctantly.
Mookie Carlisle, defensive analyst, has been whispering in Pete's ear all week. He's going to be whispering in his ear regardless of the outcome here because of Steve calling his defense a wet paper towel. So Pete's going TCU with this one, but he's going to hear it from Mookie next week, I'm sure.
Taylor, that was just a really strong effort. I hope Pete takes it in the good humor in which it was intended. And we did not divulge any Pete Thamel sources in the making of this podcast. It was purely teasing Pete because of his difficult work schedule this week. He was unable to join us for the picks, but we appreciate him submitting the picks and getting them into Taylor so that we could have a little sport at his expense. So good job coming up with all of those contacts. You know what the funny thing would be? He won't have to divulge anybody. I hope you wrote those down someplace, or if not, make a log of them. And some of them were so far off the beaten path. I'll bet you Thamel knows a decent percentage of the people. I know he knows Del McGee. So there's one. And anybody else that's on staff probably knows. But when you went way down to the mental conditioning staff, I'd like to know the percentage of people that you referenced does Pete actually know. I'll bet it's a ridiculously high percentage.
We'll go through them next week on the pod. It'll be a fun bit. Close the gap.
Let's do that on Monday. Let's go through them, and we'll just play. Do you know this person? And just throw it out there.
He's going to listen to this too, so he'll be prepared.
Oh yeah, he'll be ready. And if not, maybe he'll get to know them. You know, one final thing: these connections. We play this game sometimes on College Game Day basketball with Seth Greenberg. You know, who's the coach at some obscure school out of the 300 or whatever. And it all started because we were sitting around a table and somebody said, after a game day or after a game one night, said, do you know every coach? And he said, I most of them or whatever. So we just started firing random names. And if he couldn't pull the name immediately, he would go, wait a minute. This guy, the guy that's there, I worked with him in an Adidas camp in 1997. And then, there was this in connection, and boom, he would work his way to the name. And it was a fascinating trick. I'll bet, or not trick, a bit of knowledge, reservoir of knowledge. I'll bet Pete does that with somebody that we least expect of all of these names. That would be my guess. We should have the race for the hamburger and all of us see who gets closest to the number of people that Pete actually knows, and the loser has to buy the winner's hamburgers or something.
Well, there were 10
I'll say
here.
He's over 50%.
Yeah,
there are 10 there. How many?
Easily.
How many does he know, Steve? How many would you say?
I think it's closer to 70.
Yeah, probably so. Taylor, you were the one put in the position to have to do that. How many do you think he knows?
I'm going to say 4. We went pretty deep here at the end, so I'm going to go 4.
You went deep. You did. Steve said 7. I'm going to go
70%.
70%. So 7 out of 10. I'm going to say he knows 6.
Okay.
I'll say he knows 6.
I do have a request, and maybe this will get he might be already gone. Last week, Caleb Williams threw an unbelievable 75-yard touchdown to Brendan Rice. I would love to see Pete just stand at 75 yards and catch that pass. He doesn't have to do the running. Just stand there and catch the pass from Caleb Williams. That's what I need to see. If you're with Caleb Williams, you got to catch a ball from him. I want to see Pete's skills. He's got to put the phone down, though. That's the key.
Yeah, the ball will be sailing toward him. Wait, I have to take a call from Puka Nacua. Who, by the way, how about Puka in the NFL showing up?
I know. I couldn't help but laugh. I also, Rece, I'm watching late night Auburn and Cal late night Saturday, and I just had to chuckle to myself about the culture shock for the people from Auburn and what they saw out in Berkeley, but then thinking about you telling me your story about your mom's first time to Dreamland Barbecue for a little culture. Like, just the hospitality is a little different in different places of the world. And I'm sitting there at whatever it was, 1 Central, just chuckling to myself. Actually wishing I did have some more Dreamland ribs, but it was. I'm waiting to see some social media posts from Auburn people. Because that place is as different as it gets.
To let the people in on it, my mom, who grew up in Alabama, she was not a stranger to barbecue places, But the first time that we went to Dreamland when I was in school at Alabama, she hadn't been there. She didn't really, know about it because my parents, weren't fortunate enough to go to college. So, they didn't know. So I discovered this. I took them there and it was crowded like you couldn't believe. So when we get a table finally, they pull a garbage can, one of the giant garbage cans up to the side of the table. And the person puts her arm at the end of the table and just rakes all of the rib bones, the sauce, the paper plates, everything, just rakes it into this giant vat of garbage right beside the table. And it says, what do you have? Basically, what do you want? We ordered right there. My mom was appalled. I'm not even sure. She subsequently learned to enjoy the food, but she was never a big fan. And look, things have changed a lot at Dreamland. This is, 40 years ago or whatever, 30, 40 years ago. And, but it was different. She was appalled, and maybe there was similar culture shock for some of the Auburn fans who made their way to Berkeley last weekend. Be interesting to see if Auburn gets it going. My son, who I mentioned, my daughter rooting for Alabama earlier in the podcast this week. My son roots for Auburn, and he told me, he said, I don't really know the rhyme or reason for why they're putting in Peyton Thorne or Robbie Ashford at the time. If they do, he said, maybe they know, because I don't quite get it. They're just kind of like, hey, you go try this play, So, but hey, he was a mad scientist. You never know. So,
yep.
Oh man. All right, Steve, that was fun, my friend. And we appreciate Pete for his good humor too. So thanks for listening to the College Game Day Podcast. Subscribe. That's the easiest way to make sure that you never miss an episode. Good luck on your picks this week. I know we'll need it.